Welcome to Second Shift Playbook, the essential podcast for women navigating the dual demands of professional careers and home responsibilities.
This show is dedicated to the millions of women who've had to make the tough choice between their careers and caring for their families, and to those who strive daily to balance both.
In a world where women, especially women of color, in high-stress fields like the medical sector and academia, face the daunting challenge of the second shift at home, we're here to offer support, guidance, and empowerment.
Our mission is to shine a light on the stories of resilience and determination, to discuss the policies and changes needed to support women fully, and to explore how we can all contribute to a more equitable society. Each episode features conversations with trailblazing women like Tia Williams, the best-selling author and beauty editor at Tom Ford, Lily Panchasarp, an innovative account executive at Disney,
Pamela Price, the dedicated Deputy Director of Balm and Gilead Incorporated, and Michelle Geathers, the Visionary Chief Diversity Officer and Head of Corporate Responsibility at Visa.
These remarkable women share their journeys, the obstacles they've overcome, and their strategies for managing the complex interplay of work and home life.
Second Shift Playbook isn't just a podcast.
It's a movement towards creating a world where women don't have to choose between their careers and their families.
As a retired anesthesiologist who has dedicated my career to serving the people of North Carolina through health equity and policy change, I am now committed to advocating for women's empowerment and policies that uplift us all.
As a PhD in sociology, public health researcher, and entrepreneur, I have a deep understanding of stigma and discrimination, emotional intelligence, social psychology, and stress management. I've dedicated my career to advocating for marginalized communities to access resources, and am now committed to advocating for women to become financially independent and fully empowered to navigate life's challenges. Join us as we delve into the realities, the struggles, and the victories of working women everywhere. Together, we can redefine what it means to work and live in harmony, supporting one another through the challenges of the second shift. Welcome to Second Shift Playbook. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Second Shift Playbook. I am Dr. Allison Matthews. Interested in health equity. I like to see myself as an entrepreneur and really love supporting women. I'm here with my business partner, Charlene Green. Charlene, introduce yourself.
Yes, I am glad to be here with everybody, and Rachel Zimmer. I am a board certified anesthesiologist, but a climate change advocate and a women empowerment advocate. And we just want to make the world a better place for all people, but particularly women.
Awesome. So today we are joined by our amazing guest, Rachel Zimmer. Rachel Zimmer is a doctor of nurse practitioner. She has a background in food health and food security, and she has focuses on mental health and wellness. And she has actually just started a new company called Hygge Abode. Now it's spelled differently though. It's Hygge. It looks like Hygge or Hygge, but it's Hygge Abode, which is based on a Swedish philosophy of interior decorating that prioritizes mental health and wellness. And she also runs a satellite community clinic with Wake Forest University School of Medicine and focuses on food access and nutrition. Welcome, Rachel.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
We're happy to have you here. So, Rachel, we typically start off in our podcast by talking about things that are happening in the news or popular culture. And so one of the things that I have had the opportunity, I'm staying here with my parents for a month in Texas, and we're sitting here watching Netflix all the time. And one of the Netflix shows that we just recently watched was You Are What You Eat. Have you heard of that documentary?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I haven't watched it, but I've heard of it. It's kind of interesting. I'm grateful that there's shows that are continuing to come out to explain the concept of you are what you eat, because I think sometimes we get in our habits of doing what's easy. So we don't understand all the time how that actually impacts our health and our mental health even. So I'm always happy to hear that there's another show kind of pushing the understanding of nutrition and the importance of nutrition forward. So yeah, that's exciting.
So one of the premises of the show that I thought was just interesting, and I wanted to watch it with my parents because, you know, as we age, the food impacts our health outcomes, and I think it becomes even more important as you get older. And I think we're from the South. We're a Black family that likes to eat well, but I think it's also important for us to think about how we eat healthy food, right? And how recently my parents' doctors prescribed to them to read a book, How Not to Die by Dr. Greger. And it was like talking about the same thing on like you are what you eat, in the sense that like the food, if you eat like a lot of meat or animal-based products, that actually like increases your risk for all these adverse health outcomes like diabetes and heart disease and stroke and cancer, versus eating a more plant-based diet that actually can reduce and or reverse some of the health conditions. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I, in my clinical practice, treat people who have dementia, and something that I'll counsel younger older adults on is the importance of nutrition, even as a younger older adult, because nutrition plays such a role in even preserving your cognition over time. And I actually had just written a blog article explaining also that the type of food you take in influences the serotonin production in your gut. So people don't understand all the time that, your mood is actually impacted by the types of food that you eat. So if you think about, if you eat a big, Big Mac with fries or whatever, is popular at the fast food restaurants, typically speaking, you don't feel that great afterwards. And there's a actual, there's a reason for that. So yeah, there's multiple impacts of nutrition, especially moving toward a plant-based diet, that's important for your health. So I would agree that it's something to think about.
And I was just going to say that, millions of Americans struggle with putting food on the table and just fulfilling the need of just, with hunger and all. I want to say that long time ago, and reportedly, hopefully I'm not in the organization, but I think with the Department of Agriculture said in 2022 that 44.2 million Americans were food insecure. And that's a huge number.
Yeah.
And so that's really, really important to us to maybe deal with, because many of those families and millions of Americans are held at households held by women. So women and children are suffering immensely from poverty and food insecurity. So that's really important for us. How do we address that? So we're glad to have you on with us to talk about some of those things. One of the things I was going to mention about the interconnectivity of climate change, and I was wondering if you could just talk about that as regards to the connectivity of climate change. And the hottest year on Earth was 2023. How that's going to affect food growth in our country, but particularly around the world.
Yeah, those are really big concepts. So I'll start with food insecurity. So a lot of my work centers around addressing food insecurity. And when we define food insecurity, that means somebody has trouble affording healthy foods on a consistent basis. So what we'll find is, nationally speaking, about 10% of Americans will say that they have trouble. But when you look, if you stratify that, it disproportionately, it's doubled in our Black and Latino communities and our American, Native American communities as well. And in fact, a report just came out today by the AARP Foundation looking at older adults, and food insecurity rates have gone up for the first time in lots of years in older adults, and it had been historically going down. So we we have a worsening problem, unfortunately, of food insecurity in our communities. In addition to that, it's complicated by transportation difficulties, functional difficulties that make it hard for some people to leave their homes. Difficulties in just being able to prepare foods, because, right, if you have a single person household, then they're having to maybe work more than one job and then trying to figure out how to manage a meal plan, even if they're able to get to healthy, foods. So, yeah, there's a lot of barriers in, notwithstanding climate change already for addressing food insecurity in communities. We're trying to address that by delivering free produce to people's homes. We've been doing that since the pandemic. I study that. I've been looking even at mood and how that's being impacted just by providing produce boxes, in addition to like cardiometabolic outcomes and just, overall well-being and quality of life. So, we're still looking at that data, but we're seeing across the country that programs like ours are making an impact, a positive impact. It's just, it always comes down to sustainability when you think about things like that. And so working with the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, advocates for strengthening programs like that help to cause some of these programs to be more sustainable. And then when you throw climate change on top of it, then we have a whole new bucket of worms. And one thing I've been encouraged by, especially here in our city, has been the growth of hydroponic locations. I think there's some promise in that. I've been interested in, I got to visit the one that just opened up in one of our communities, and I've been encouraged by the production already within just 3 months of opening of the greens that they've been able to produce. So I'm really interested. I think Americans, I think people are innovative. They come up, we're very resilient. That's why we're still alive as a race. So, the human race. And so I'm hopeful that even despite, problems like climate change, we can come up with some solutions that may help sustain us. I think we will, but I agree. Climate change, and of course, this is disproportionately impacting urban centers of cities. And so, you have food deserts within urban centers of cities. So you've just got this worsening problem that's perpetuated by climate change. So yeah, it's a big problem.
And one of the last things that I was going to mention is the interconnectivity of inequality or poverty. I know one of our colleagues, Dr. Mark Massing, has done, some slide presentations for, some organizations that we've been a part of. And one of the things that has always been impressive to me is that in one of his slides, he says that the 3 richest billionaires have more combined wealth than the poorest 50% of it. So 3 billionaires have more wealth than 165 million Americans. But the most interesting thing of one of his slides for Dr. Mark Massing was that 26 of the richest billionaires in the world have more wealth than the poorest 50% of the world population.
Wow.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
That reminds me
it continues to grow too. The wealth gap continues to grow.
And that was in 2021. So it's worse now. But yes.
Yeah. That reminds me of Matthew Desmond's book. Speaking of books, Poverty by America, he talks about that. So I think that's a really good point to bring up.
So thank you for being here, and thank you for what you're doing. Awesome.
Yeah. So can you tell me a little bit more about this hydroponic? When I think about hydroponic, I think about something else. But can you tell me more about this hydroponic garden and what Yeah, tell me more about it. I'm curious.
So I don't want to give communities, because people who are listening to this probably not going to know exactly where it is. But there is a hydroponic location that had been held by the city for a while. They were waiting for somebody to contract and open it up. So one of the local nonprofits here opened it up, and it's being managed by some of the urban farmers in partnership with the nonprofit. And they're using it to distribute produce out to the community. So people are not buying what's coming out of the hydroponic garden. They're using it for food distribution because it's located in a community that's considered a food desert.
Oh, so they're giving the food away for free.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Correct.
okay. And then, but so how do people, I don't know if you know this or not, but how do people sign up to even know or get access to the free food?
Well, this nonprofit serves the children in the community. So they're already in hubs across the community on certain days. And so they've been doing that it was started by a pediatrician here in town,
So is it
Hope of
helping
Winston-Salem. Yeah,
helping our people
helping our
eat?
people eat.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so they've been in those community hubs for a while. So that's what the distribution channel for the hydroponics right now.
Yeah,
I,
I could see churches being a part of that too. I know a lot of churches do food distribution as
Mm-hmm.
well. Charlene, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that reminds me of that's fabulous what they're doing. But, there's some huge manufacturing, farms that are like some of the biggest producers of food in this country is only produced by 3 or 4 monopoly companies. One of which is we're talking about a tomato farm out in California. And it was an article in White time ago that basically said that the produce for tomatoes for the pizza companies, the 3 major pizza companies, are all made in one huge 10-20,000 acre hydrophobic farm, right? The pros and cons of that sometimes is that it takes the farmers productivity away when there's one company producing everything, but that's not the same you're doing. What you guys are doing is fantastic, but I think there's pros and cons to maybe having one company have one huge farm that's taking away the farming or agricultural needs of local communities,
Yeah, oh, I agree with that. And there's a huge land ownership issue, right, when it comes to thinking about farmers and land access. So that's the other thing I think when you think about climate change is the ability of good lands are already limited to certain groups of people. So yeah, I mean, it's complicated. But we could have a whole podcast about this.
I know.
Right.
And that's awesome.
Oh, I was thinking about also there's kind of networks of Black farmers that, in North Carolina, I think about the Black Farmers Market, and there's another company, small company called Tall Grass Food Box in Durham, who work with Black farmers across the state of North Carolina to get their produce, and then sell food box subscriptions to people. But it helps support the Black farmer economy as well. And it requires us to have kind of innovative solutions like that, and to think about, like, to get beyond the kind of big box one manufacturer system that we have right now that has this monopoly on the food.
But if we keep increasing the temperature, by 2050, reportedly in North Carolina, the data shows that you will not be able to grow like much of any crops because of the high heat. So that's new data that's coming out. In addition to the intensity of the heat that's going to kill Americans and North Carolinians. So like you said, that's another long topic, but it's all interconnected.
Yeah, definitely. And you're right. There are good programs right now that, like our program uses regional produce. When I first started the program in 2020, we only source from regional and urban farmers. So we did that very intentionally because I was co-chair of the regional food council at the time. So I had great connections with some of the farmers, and we knew that their distribution channels were going to be limited during the pandemic. And so we wanted to support them. And I'll tell you, we did do qualitative research as a part of the first round of produce prescriptions, and they loved that produce because it tastes different. Local produce tastes different than going to a big box store. So a tomato is not a tomato, right? Like it is not the same thing when you think about local versus going to a grocery store and grabbing it. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's the other thing too, is sometimes we forget how good produce tastes. And I do wonder how much that influences people's choices, because if all you're getting is what's in the grocery store and you never taste fresh produce, then I can imagine that that's, a part of the reason that you may not be as interested. Anyways, I digress.
That's real. I remember I went to a food farmer's market, and I got this carton of okra from a local farmer, and I brought it
Mm-hmm.
to my house, and I just sat on the counter. I was like, "Oh my God, I can smell the okra. It reminds
Mm-hmm.
me of my grandparents' garden." It was so fragrant, and it made me realize that the okra and the food that I was getting from the grocery store was because it has been refrigerated for so long, it
Mm-hmm.
loses a lot of the flavor and the freshness. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. So I love
Yeah.
that point. Yeah.
Totally agree. And I listened to the Minimalist podcast. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but
Yeah.
they just did an episode where they were talking to a local agriculturist who was who's also a physician, but he was really interested in food and health. And he was talking about even eating tomatoes with his teeth off the vine, and just how like connected he felt to the earth as a part of, that exercise. And just, being connected. His premise was to be more connected with the food that we're eating, and how important that is for our bodies.
So, okay, so switching gears, or maybe not, like, how did you get into starting this company, Huga Abode?
Yeah,
Tell us
it's
the
kind of an
story.
offshoot. Yeah, it sounds like a jump, but it's not. So I think I had mentioned that I do home-based primary care. So I'm a primary care provider for people who have dementia or older adults with functional disabilities. And I also go into people's homes every week. I've been in thousands of homes, and so I understand how the environment impacts your health. And I've done so much teaching one-on-one with people around, the importance of not having a cluttered house, and even like, beyond fall risk, the anxiety that provokes for somebody. If they're sitting in a room, they're not able to get up and walk very well, and the room is completely cluttered and dirty, that mentally takes a toll on them. And so, and then of course, my cultural heritage. My mom is Hungarian. My dad is Swedish. And so I had gone to Sweden actually about 4 years ago. And I don't know, I just felt really connected to the aesthetic of the Swedes. And I always joked that if I weren't a healthcare provider, I'd be an interior designer. I love interior design, the idea of it, how it impacts your health and your mood. And I've always had friends come over and say, "Gosh, I love how your house looks. How do you do that?" And I don't really think about it. And so I said, I wonder if I could just like pull that together. The educational pieces of it, my love, of sort of the Scandinavian concept, or it's a Danish word, Huga, but it's sort of a Norwegian concept of making your home a space of respite, connecting with others. Like, I understand the importance of social connection and how that impacts your life, your quality of life, but also the trajectory of your life. And so I think that these are concepts that people maybe underestimate. And the other thing too is, when you're in communities and you feel like you don't have a lot of control over things, your environment is something that you do have some control over. Even if, no matter how much money you make, right? Like, you can put pieces in place around you that provide respite and rest and connection with others. You can do that. And so I wanted to be able to empower people. And then the other thing too is, I wanted to think about how I was sourcing for our business. So I wanted to support women-owned businesses, especially Black-owned businesses. And so when I'm buying the products, I'm thinking about, are they eco-friendly? Are they sustainable? Are they, made by women? Are they global makers who are interested in this aesthetic? So I kind of think about all those things. And then also, my husband is a designer as well. And so it gives him a space to make products out of artisan concrete. So I don't know, it's just sort of all of me wrapped up into a business is what it's become.
I love it. So, Charlene, you're on mute.
Yes. I was just going to say, what are some of the challenges that you faced with all that you're doing And how have you been able to overcome some of these challenges?
um, oh goodness. Well, I do work in terms of my work. I always say that the worst thing I ever became was a nurse, and the best thing I ever became was a nurse. I think being a nurse has allowed me to be a part of very vulnerable situations with people. I've had the pleasure of helping people as they exit this life into the next life, right? And those are beautiful moments that I treasure. But it has also pigeonholed me in a lot of ways. I tend to be a global thinker. I think about things in systems, and I found that in the traditional healthcare setting, that has been very limited for me. And so I've struggled to find a path inside of systems that doesn't always support, leadership, especially from a nurse's perspective. And so I think and then of course my programs are very much to support, I'm always fighting for, what you would call the underdog, right? Like I developed a mobile health program for people who don't have health insurance in North Carolina, and, a food prescription program for people who have struggled, getting to healthy foods. And so these are not programs that necessarily have, financial viability when you're thinking about a capitalist system. And so that can be difficult to implement and sustain inside of, the American healthcare system. I would say that in Europe, especially in Sweden, it's a different situation where they just have a different culture and mentality around supporting the people in that country versus like how we think about supporting people here. Not to say that there's not problems, it's just so different.
So how did you deal with the kind of challenges to the lack of support of of the work that you do?
Some of it started with me. I mean, Hugo Bode kind of came out of even like my own journey. I think I had a moment of breakdown during the pandemic. I was doing way too much. I was trying to like do everything. I saw a lot of need, and I'm trying to like meet all the need. And then and my husband said, like, you are one person. It is not possible for you to continue at this level. And I was sacrificing my own family in that space. And so I had a moment of breaking. It was through that breaking that I started to take care of myself. I was not taking care of myself. And so I had always exercised. That was never a problem, but just to walk for peace, just to get outside and be in nature again, because I enjoy nature, or to journal. I hadn't journaled in years. And so the practice of mindfulness and journaling and just taking those moments for myself, I started there, honestly, about four years ago. And I didn't think I could sustain it, but with a lot of counseling and support, I was able to sustain a practice that brought me healing for myself. And then I think learning that my path within a system was not going to be one of corporate leadership. I'm not a corporate person. I'm always pushing the envelope on what should be or what looks right. And so I knew that my ideas need to be captured in something I could manage. And so that's where Hugo Bode kind of birthed out of, was something that was just me, that I could own, that my message could be my message and not anybody else's. And so I think, and then also just wanting to empower other people, because I have seen the pain of other professional women. I work with lots of physicians and nurses and healthcare providers, and we're struggling, as a profession, professional group of people, especially women. Women are juggling too much, and we always say work-life balance. I don't know if that's even possible unless you take, intentional spaces for yourself. And so I wanted to be able to give tools for women, especially, to be able to help take care of themselves. So, I think Hugo Bode, it's about home design and, bringing sustainable things and supporting women, but it's also about supporting women in other ways, like, coaching through self-care and coaching through, like, how do you rest? What is rest? How do you bring connection back into your life? I was just talking to a friend, she's pregnant, and her mom had moved to town, and she was just talking about how she's working all the time. She's pregnant. She still doesn't see her mom, even though her mom moved to town to be with her. and just, feeling disconnected, even despite the fact that they were very intentional about her being there while she was pregnant. And so, those are the things that I think we as women struggle with, and maybe I can help in whatever way through the business.
So this is exactly, why Alice and I thought the second playbook would be needed for women, particularly because it's really hard to balance a career and family. But I'm really interested in just maybe you giving some examples of, you mentioned about coaching, how to rest and things like that. What are some of the tools? What are some of the books you recommend to the women for that? One of the things that's so fascinating about the brain for me is how the glial cells work. And many people don't know, how glial cells work, but if you don't get enough sleep, your glial cells can't function and eat all those toxic things from your brain to make you a better person for the next day and memory and things like that. I was wondering if you could maybe highlight some of the coaching, not give away your secrets, of course, but some of the coaching tools and things like that you do for helping people rest.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I was actually just working on that. I'm working on, I've developed a tool. Specifically, I've been focusing on the bedroom and sleep right now, because we are a sleep deprived society, and sometimes we don't prioritize that in our lives. And so, I've been doing some research just around. I'm not a sleep expert, but I know a lot about sleep, right? And and then tying that into your environment. And then also tying that into what can I do about my environment to impact my sleep. And so I've put together just like a digital course where I have a worksheet that you can work through, to do sort of a pre-assessment of your own sleep habits and your bedroom. And then teaching people why is sleep important, right? Like, what are the different stages of sleep and what do they actually do for you? Like, why do I even need REM sleep? And then if I don't get REM sleep, why does that even matter, right? So I think sometimes people will say, well, I get 4 hours of sleep every night, I'm good. Well, why does it matter that you didn't get the REM sleep, in a sufficient amount? And how is that going to impact you later? And then, okay, now that you know that, what can you do to make your sleep habits better, both within your environment, like your bedroom, but also within your own habits, right? So coaching around relaxation techniques, sleep hygiene techniques, things that we provide one-on-one and like clinical care, but more not necessarily, like in a one-on-one situation, but generally speaking. And I've never found content out there that puts it all together for people. And so I'm trying to do that, put it all together for people. And then I have just like a little ebook where I've consolidated the resources so that people could do more research on their own and hopefully be able to find and do some more. Like, oh, how do I make a mood board? Like, how do you even start to design a bedroom? It's not for interior designers. You don't have to have an interior. I mean, sure, if you want one, you can. But if you want to take control of your own environment, there are tools that you can use to do that.
And so, you mentioned
I was going to ask, where, like, does it matter where you put your bed or like where you keep your phone in your room? Like, so
you don't keep your phone in your room.
What the temperature is in your room. Like, what are some of those
all
really
of that
practical
matters,
things?
Yeah, I mean, if you were thinking about your bedroom, the color of your room matters. So thinking about calming colors that are not stimulating, right? So having red in your room may not be the best color because it is a stimulating color. It is our culture tends to associate it with, more of a movement, where versus like you have a calming blue, then a blue tends to be more of a restful color. And then even thinking about the type of lights you have in your room. So yellow, red lights, those are longer wavelengths. And so your brain processes that differently. It's more calming for you. And then, where the blue lights, people hear blue light all the time and they're like, oh, what is blue light? What does it even matter? And those are actually very stimulating for you. Use that. That's why the daylight is stimulating. It's why the sky is blue, like it's so that you stay awake and alert. So thinking about the science behind it. So I try to dig into the science behind it a little bit. And then just the importance of the materials that are on your bed. That's actually important, right? The breathability of your sheets. People actually think that the higher the thread count, the better, but actually you want it to be a little bit lower so that it's breathing. You want air exchange to be happening. And then even, this is a Swede thing, but Swedes tend to sleep with two blankets, two different types of blankets. So that way, if your partner is hot natured and you're cold natured, you have temperature control on both sides of the bed to support your sleep habits. So it's just things like that, thinking about the textures around your bed. So for example, I have a sheepskin beside of my bed, and the texture of the sheepskin on my feet before I get into my bed just is another thing to remind my brain. It's the only place in the whole house that I have sheepskin, but it reminds me that, oh, this is time for bed. And then so those are the sorts of things that I cover in the course, just those pieces, in addition to, the scrolling problem that we all have, putting your phone outside of your bedroom, only using your bedroom for sleep and sex, not using it for work. The clutter that's in your room, people don't realize that even when you're asleep, that leaves your brain in a more active state. So the anxiety that clutter can cause, even though you don't realize that. So it's really just pulling science and environment together and trying to help people, think through the room in a more scientific way, I guess, and then saying, okay, what can I actually do about this? And what are the things that I love? How do I integrate what I love into my space, right? So I'm providing some guidance on how do you include the personal things that are important to you in your space, and how do you put that together, and what should be on your nightstand, those sorts of things.
I was wondering, how do you get your people to keep their phones outside their bedroom?
I do it, but it's taken practice, and I can't say that I have fallen off the wagon a couple times. Okay. But it takes intentionality. I'm not perfect, but I bought an analog clock, and so people will say, well, I need the alarm. Well, they have alarm clocks. They've had them for years. And so I have an analog clock beside of my bed. So that way I'm not tempted to use my phone as the alarm clock. So that's one tip that I have: keep your phone out of your room. And then, also thinking about, what do you absolutely need to do at 9 o'clock at night on your phone? What is it that you feel has to be done? Just taking a step back, like the why. How your mom says, ask a bunch of whys and then you'll get to the answer. So, or at least my mom used to say that.
I feel judged right now with my phone.
No, I'm not judging you. I have problems too. I preach it, but there's nights where I'm on my phone at 9 o'clock and I'm like, why am I on my phone?
I'm horrible with that. That's like probably the hardest thing for me to stop doing is use my phone at night and right before I go to bed. But I did buy a sunrise clock. So that stimulates this, especially when time changes and it's like super dark in the morning, it simulates the sunrise so that I can wake up. So I like that.
That's a great first step.
So my next question is, and this is something that, work-life balance and all that good stuff that we're talking about. Everybody has different streams of income and, different socioeconomic levels and that type of thing. But what would you pay any amount of money to make your life easier?
A clone.
I'm sorry?
A clone. Another one of me.
Wouldn't we? I want a wife. Look. Seriously. Well, any amount of money. An au pair, I guess, would be the closest thing that would be possible.
Okay.
If I could make my life easier by having somebody else help me with cooking and cleaning and it's all that stuff that just takes so much time.
But then you would have to manage that person too.
Yeah, but if I had any amount of money, I would think we would get somebody really good.
Right.
I know. The only reason why I say that, I mention that because I've had experiences with friends that have had au pairs, and many of them are young people, under the age of like 25, and it becomes you mentoring and becoming a mom to them too. And so that's right. You know, they're coming over. Many of them come from different countries, and so they're coming over, and they're like, "Oh, I'm in the U.S." and they have to be managed like they're teenagers too. It's actually an interesting story. But that's another whole podcast on that.
Yeah, I never thought about that because I dream about having an au pair in my house.
Right.
Like, they're gonna solve all my problems. But
And
that's
interestingly, if they have many, my experience with what people have talked about it, there's a limit of how long they can work at times. So if it's 40 hours a week, because if they watch your kid, for a school day that's from like 7 a.m. till you get back from work to 7 p.m., that's 12 hours of their work day, and they actually can't work anymore. It's actually an interesting story. So sometimes you have to be careful what you ask for, but I think most people would love to have one as well. But yeah.
I'm going back to the clone then. Let's just do the clone.
Clone is good. Clone is good.
So, what are some things that you do? I guess we've kind of talked about it with the Hugo boat, but like, what are some of the things that you do to take care of yourself, especially as a mom of 2 children?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think I mentioned this. I really like nature. I actually like to hike, and I find hiking to be very meditative for me. So we do that. I had mentioned my daily practice. I do a daily practice of prayer. I'm a person of faith. So every morning I wake up early. I'm an early bird. So I wake up really early. I make the coffee in the old way. I do a Chemex, like the whole drip, drip, drip coffee. And then I use that time for prayer. I do my journaling before everybody gets up. I exercise almost every day. Not anything crazy, but whether it's a walk or strength training, or I just bought a row machine. I think I mentioned that, like just because it's cold and I don't like the cold. So I wanted to find something cardiovascular to do. So those are things that I enjoy doing. I have a group of women that are really supportive, and we do like a Bible study every week, and that's my sort of friend support. And yeah, the consistency of finding space too for friends. So being mindful about the people that I care about, and finding space even within the week to say, hey, you want to grab coffee, or do you want to catch up? And I count that as self-care because it energizes me to be around other people. And then I like to give back. Like it also energizes me to be giving. And there's a lot of research that shows that, right? Like that if you give back, you actually get a lot more out of it than you're giving. And so I find that very energizing. So people may say, oh, you're busy all the time, but a lot of it is stuff that really energizes me. So finding spaces that do that.
So I have a question, and this is just out of the blue. I'm working on trying to eat right and eat better. I was just wondering, like, what would be something you enjoy that is a really healthy meal for you? Like,
Yeah, I'm a big salmon fan. I love a really good salmon salad, like a cold salad that's got blackened salmon on it. It's not hard to make, and I love that. That is like so good.
So what would you put in a salad? Pomegranates, onion? What would you?
Yeah, like pickle. I love pickled red onions. Deviled egg, like the eggs, not deviled eggs, but the eggs that are hard boiled. To cut up and put in there. I tend to be a little bit more on the savory side when it comes to the salmon salads, but stuff like that.
And you eat it plain? No dressing?
No, I'll make the dressing for it which is not hard. Like you just, get olive oil, a little balsamic, throw it in there, salt and pepper, put some Italian, spices in there, shake it all up, throw it on there. It tastes much better.
I anything with salmon on it, I'm going to eat, like salmon tacos, It's just salmon, and
I
then
love it.
other side salmon salad. Anything with salmon, I'm good.
I'm really picky about the salmon though. Like the taste of it has to be right. Like, you know how like the pale pink salmon, it doesn't taste right. So I always, I check out the color before I buy it.
So in that
Or
you what
or
you eat. Oh my God, this freaked me out because I love salmon so much. In the You Are What You Eat documentary on Netflix, it goes into salmon in particular, and I was like, why are you ruining salmon for me? But it talks about like salmon farms and
oh yeah.
how the pale salmon is actually fattier, and it doesn't have the health benefits that you would want because
Yeah.
it's they're basically eating feed and eating their own feces and stuff. I was like, oh my God, I don't want to know. But you definitely want to go for wild caught salmon because it's healthier, it's leaner, and it also
and
is
it tastes
more
better.
flavorful. Yeah, it's more flavorful.
So for you fish lovers, I'm going to say that there was a report out, I think it was in the New York Times a couple of years ago, that basically said that a lot of the fish is imported from China, right? And when they get to test the fish and look for high levels of antibiotics and contamination, all of it gets sent back, and it's high levels of everything. But we only test maybe less than 1%.
Yeah, so I'm really intentional about the fish, actually. So if we're going to go into this line of thinking, so I will shop at a market that will tell me where it's coming from and if it's wild caught. And then there's one grocery store that has Norwegian fish, Norwegian salmon, and I really like Norwegian salmon. So there are ways to check where they're sourcing from, and they're graded. So you are correct that there's some difficulties with the fish industry, but there are ways to watch it.
If you ever feel comfortable, send that hashtag of the places where you get your healthy fish so that we can share it with our podcast.
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
Sure,
I think also like as I'm thinking about having children and starting to do research on like what kind of foods have impact on me and my fertility, and they talk about fish in particular and mercury and iodine poisoning and things like that. So also just being very aware of where your fish is sourced from because of the contaminants that can come in the fish.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, and I'll say that, I mean, I don't want to like name drop, but like some of the grocery stores that you would consider more higher end are the ones that they're gonna tell you where they source from. So that's really because their clientele expects it. So
yeah.
But I will tell you, the price is no different, which I think is really interesting. No, the price is no different. In fact, it may be sometimes better. I think because the volume that they bring in is higher.
Wow.
So I guess we want to wrap up and ask you, you've mentioned some like books and podcasts and things like that, but what are some of your favorite tools, books, articles, podcasts that help you navigate your life as a working woman?
Well, let's see. As a working woman, podcast-wise, I don't know that I follow anything as a working woman. I really like The Minimalist, which I had mentioned, which does help me navigate my life as a person. I like House Rules, which is by another home designer in North Carolina. So I like to listen to her. She's got just, small tidbits of tips, which are fun. She talked about decluttering your Christmas stuff. So that kind of stuff is really practical. I enjoy listening to her. In terms of books, there's a book called Home Therapy, which I really like, and it just came out last year. It's the only other person in healthcare that I have found who's in the home design space. She's a mental health therapist, and she did family and couple counseling, and she wrote the book from the perspective of a therapist. And so she